Welcome back to Patrick Christie's Tonight. Coming up, should woke charities that obstruct the will of the British Parliament be banned? I am, of course, talking about Care for Calais. But first, can the public trust the BBC? It's time now for the head-to-head. And the BBC once again finds itself in hot water after it emerged that the corporation edited an interview with Angela Rayner to remove this clip after Labour Party aides raised objections.
And finally, you'll remember that Keir Starmer, there was the so-called beer gate. He did nothing wrong, but he did say that had he faced a penalty notice, he would have resigned. If this turns out that you should have declared a liability and you didn't, would you be in the same position as Keir Starmer and think that your position is not sustainable?
Well, I've had the expert advice and I do not owe any capital gains tax on that property.
Well, here's BBC political journalist Nick Watt trying to spin the situation last Friday.
We decided at the time, for editorial reasons, that we shouldn't run that. Now, inevitably, you can't run all of an interview. You have to make cuts. But for transparency, I should say that the Labour team did, after the interview, raise concerns about that exchange.
Yeah, and you gave in to them, didn't you? But the incident has sparked concerns about the BBC's impartiality, not least because Labour have been doing their level best to stop the media reporting the allegations that Rayner may have broken the law with the sale of her former home. When this programme, Patrick Christie's Tonight, went to the Labour Party about the claims, they told us, firstly, it was not a story. They also said they didn't want us to report it. Former Labour parliamentary candidate John O'Farrell tried the same tactics on the BBC yesterday.
I think this is such a ridiculous non-story. The BBC here to keep spending time on this and to have Yvette Cooper sit here and come and talk about violence against women and girls, and that to take second place to this bit of gossip that the Mail has pushed and pushed and pushed, and for the BBC to have to say, we have to cover this because the Mail have keep covering it, and so it becomes a story, and it's not a story.
Well, unlike the BBC, we decided not to listen to Labour's press officers, because why should we? And it today went from bad to worse for the Beat, with Radio 4 presenter Nick Robinson forced to admit that he hadn't been clear enough when he made this comment in an interview with the Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron earlier this morning.
Isn't the real risk of where we are now that Western governments appear to back Israel the moment that Israel is under attack, but when Israel attacks and murders tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians, we say the words, but we do almost nothing?
So, after they admitted editing an interview with Angela Rayner and Labour staffers complained, can the public trust the BBC? Let me know your thoughts now. Head to gbnews.com/your say or tweet me at GBNews. And while you're there, make sure you vote in our poll. The results will follow very, very shortly. But first, doing battle on this, I'm joined now by the campaign director of Defund the BBC, Rebecca Ryan. And, of course, I also have as well Ahmad. Now, I'm just going to go to Rebecca first on this. What's your view on this? Can we trust the BBC?
Well, as campaign director for Defund the BBC, I think, it's predictable that I would say absolutely not. But actually, the data shows, that the public doesn't trust the BBC. And what we're seeing here is the BBC acting as the sort of media arm of the Labour Party, and they can't get away with sort of picking and choosing which bits of news they show or which bits they don't, when this was clearly a story. And we know absolutely if this had been a Conservative Party cabinet minister, then this would certainly have been shown. And we all know that for a fact. So, this is what makes people really, lose their tether with the BBC, is this sort of double standard all the time. And, the BBC has to get to grips with this.
OK, and I'm just going to introduce Akhil now as former head of religions and ethics at the BBC. Thank you very much for joining us. Look, I mean, it looks as though if the Labour Party say, oh, look, we'd really rather you didn't report that, then the BBC won't do it.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, because I think for any political party, but I think there are circumstances which sometimes you have to deal with. And I think on this one, I think one of the Labour Party officials who were there said that actually this isn't the same case at that particular moment in time. This isn't the same case as it was with Keir Starmer, because there is no police investigation at this moment. And I think that's what they gave into. And then once the police did actually launch a probe into the Angela Rayner story, and it is a story as well. Nobody can deny it's not a story. At that point, then that's when the situation has changed. So I think you're right that they have given in, but they've given in because of something that was explained to them, and they've made a decision.
Well,
whether it's the right or wrong decision, but they've made that decision based on that information.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca, look, we were obviously in communication with the Labour Party. We know the things they've been saying to us. They were saying to us, this is a non-story. They said to us, you shouldn't be running this. You shouldn't be talking about it. We said, no, we think it is a story, and we've been proven right about that over in the fullness of time. You know, the BBC just decided to cave in, no?
Exactly. I mean, this is the thing, it's about picking and choosing. And it seems like the BBC is acting as if they're sort of kingmakers as to who will be the next person in number 10. And that's really unfortunate when you've got people across the country who are forced to pay for the BBC if they want to watch any live broadcast TV. And this is why people are getting more and more frustrated, because they're not seeing value for money. They're realising that actually, if you don't watch live broadcast TV, if you get everything on catch-up or on demand, as long as it's not iPlayer, you don't need to pay for the BBC. And we're seeing more and more people turning away from the BBC. And, you know, it's just because time and time again, we're seeing this sort of double standard. And absolutely, we know the BBC would have gone for it if it was a Conservative cabinet minister on a similar topic.
Well, they did. They did, Rebecca. They were all over Partygate like a rat up a drain pipe without any whiff of a police investigation for quite some time. And, Akhil, I just wonder whether or not that is, what we've just seen there, is the left-wing bias at the BBC.
If it's a left-wing bias, it's not a very good one, is it? Because you've got Robbie Gibb on the board, you've got Samir Shah as the chair, you've got Tim Davey, former.
Yeah, but what about the output, though, Akhil?
No, well, my point is actually the output. I mean, I'll tell you one thing, Patrick. Everybody has a problem with the BBC's output, having been there. Everybody has a problem, and you can pick and choose whatever bits you want to have a problem with. I think on this one, look, it doesn't compare to Partygate, and I think that's disrespectful to many of us who lost our loved ones during that time. It doesn't compare to Partygate. It is a story. The Labour Party will always try and bat it away, just like the Conservatives will. That's the part of the game. That's what they do. But the fact of the matter is, there was a complication. They made a decision. I don't know. I'm speaking purely on a personal basis. Was it the right or the wrong one?
You don't think they realise that you don't think, Akhil, that they realise that there's the potential for a Labour government around the corner, and they don't want to anger them early doors and lose some kind of contact? Because I know for a fact, by the way, that is happening in some quarters of the media right now, which means that we are not getting proper reporting of the Labour Party.
I think I know your point you're making across the whole of society, whatever industry you're in now. Everybody is thinking about who's going to be the next government, and the likelihood is it's going to be a Labour government. So there's always going to be something of that nature. This decision to air that is something to do with Newsnight. It's not actually every single other person involved in the whole of the BBC. Somebody makes an editorial decision in Newsnight about what they should or shouldn't choose, what bit of the interview they want to put in. They made a decision based on that police thing. That's all. Whether or not it was right or wrong, I would have gone with it personally. Personally, I'd have gone with it. And there'd be lots of people who would have gone with it. It's the individual editor on that day who makes the decision, not some big kind of conspiracy.
OK. Just very final quick word to you, Rebecca, because the mask slipped a little bit, did it not, with Nick Robinson earlier on when he spoke about Israel murdering a load of people. There was then the kind of Twitter response that, in my view, can probably only have been written by HR that went out saying, oh, look, I wanted to clarify this. Again, was that not another example potentially of some bias there?
Absolutely. I mean, the use of the word murder is really inflammatory, and he should know, and he does know, actually, that it's sort of the kind of reaction that word will bring about. And it's, you know, the situation in Israel and Palestine is hugely sensitive, and a state-funded, a taxpayer-funded broadcaster should have that in the forefront of their mind at all times. It's just not good enough to be using words like that and then sort of, you know, quietly sort of saying, oh, yeah, I didn't really mean it. I wasn't sort of careful enough. He should be careful enough, you know, it's important.
All right, well, look, both of you, thank you very, very much. It was a cracking head-to-head, that. So it's the campaign director of Defund the BBC, Rebecca Ryan. And the man who I think many people watching this would wish had been the editor of Newsnight is Akhil Ahmed, the former head of religions and ethics at the BBC. Take care, both of you. A BBC spokesperson said Nick Watt transparently explained the full situation to viewers on Friday's Newsnight, including the fact that it's normal to make editorial decisions about what is and isn't used from a pre-recorded interview. This was a forensic and challenging interview in which Angela Rayner was asked in detail about her tax affairs when the situation changed, including the police decision to investigate. We broadcast this exchange. We've covered this story impartially throughout. I will also stress as well that Angela Rayner denies all wrongdoing, and that is where we are with that. Who do you agree with? Can the public trust the BBC? William on X says no one can trust the biased broadcasting corporation. This is the BBC. Polly says the BBC is the best. Woo! Sean on X says Beergate was just a cover-up, so I think this thing with Rayner will be a cover-up too. Again, I will stress that Angela Rayner denies all wrongdoing. Your verdict is now in. 5% of you say the public can trust the BBC. Good grief. 95% of you say they cannot. Well, you know what? You'll have to keep watching us then.